Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday. Almost had to remember. Wednesday, Thursday? Yep, definitely Thursday. We're in another edition of the MSP Initiative Live. Today we bring Don, who is an MSP based out of Ohio. And let Don introduce himself here in a second. But before we get too far into our story, again, just our general housekeeping for anyone that's not familiar. MSP Initiative is a community, right, for IT professionals and managed services providers. We have a Channel Strong tour starting up basically next week. So if you're in the Northeast, right, like Northern Virginia, all the way up to New Hampshire, right above Boston, and anywhere in between, we will be in your backyard. So here are the dates. Here are the locations. If you're in these areas and you're an MSP or working for an MSP or running an MSP, sign up. Go to mspinitiative.com/channel, and then click on channel strong, and then scroll down to the bottom, and you'll be able to request an invite, and you'll get one. The other thing that's worth mentioning is we do monthly giveaways. So we have 10 vendor prizes that we give away every month. You basically just need to register to win. If you've already registered before in the past, you register again. If you've never registered before, register new, and all you need to do is throw your name in the hat, and you may win a prize. It's easy as that gets. So without further ado, Don, how you doing today?
I'm great, George. Just enjoying the lovely mid-July weather here in Columbus, which means it's hot and humid and will probably start hitting us with thunderstorms at any moment, or it'll be beautiful. It just depends on what it feels like doing.
Yeah, no, totally get it. We actually had I think a little bit of that in the Channel Strong tour when we were in your backyard. I think we got a little bit of rain.
We were able to arrange some late May thunderstorms, which are very popular around here. But fortunately, we have a wonderful office that is large enough to still allow social distancing, and we had a tent out on the patio. And so people were able to do a little bit indoors and a little bit outdoors, and it worked well.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you for, giving us, a place to go, and also giving us a little bit of cover during the weather. I mean, you never know what's going to happen here in the Northeast in May or June or July, I think. But, we're not too far away. I'm actually based here out of Philadelphia. We were just talking about that earlier. And, it's fun. It's funny, Don, we've now kind of been through that Ohio area twice for Channel Strong. I missed the last one. I was having another kid, and that kind of kept me locked into a desk and to the house for a second. But I didn't realize how populated Ohio is, right? Like, people forget that there's 3 or 4 major cities, right, in Ohio.
And if I put my Chamber of Commerce hat on, George, I would tell you that Columbus is actually the 14th largest city in the United States.
Wow.
Most people do not know. It's the largest city in Ohio, bigger than the other 2 that you may have heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And we're frequently overlooked, but we like to think we're a very well-kept secret. It's a very livable city, and happy to be here. I've been here 20 some years.
Wow. Are you originally from the area, or did you?
No, I was originally from Kentucky, and met my wife when I was working up in Chicago, lived there for a while, actually moved to New Hampshire briefly as part of a work gig, probably 25 years ago now, and came to Ohio from there. And it's been good. We enjoy it a lot.
That's awesome. You've been around. How did you get into, like, did you natively just jump right into IT back in the day out of school, or how did you get
my
into
background? Yeah, my background is actually in consulting. So I spent over 2 decades with what is now Accenture. I went through 3 different names with that organization. Won't go through the history of that. Mm-hmm. But I was really more of a business process consultant and worked with large teams for very large organizations in terms of helping them review processes, design new processes, implement systems, select software. and did that for a while, and then actually got into internal operations with them for a bit, and got the opportunity to do something else in 2008 and got into the managed services business, where I've been working now 12 or so years.
So that was an interesting time, right? To find, kind of financial breakdown. I think that's crisis, whatever word you want to put to it.
Right.
Why did you think managed services was a good business to get into coming out of that situation?
That's a really interesting question. I think it was a different challenge. It was working with a different profile of customers. When you work for a Fortune 500 company, you're used to dealing with, mega size of everything. You find that you're working in organizations typically where you have super or hyper specialists, who, which is nice. Don't get me wrong, right? It's nice in that you can find the most esoteric, obscure concept, and you can pick up the phone, and somewhere in that global organization, they're likely to have somebody who's done that for their entire life. I think what I've found interesting about working in the managed services business and with the types of customers that we work with, which ranges from the true SMBs. We have a few customers that have fewer than 10 employees, but we also have customers in the thousands of employees. Excuse me. And what's interesting is the big players, the Accentures, the IBMs, all of those sorts of organizations are just not well suited to really even deal with small enterprises. I mean, companies that are, a few billion in revenue even, and certainly not if you're only a couple $100 million in revenue. And I think it's interesting to work with those sorts of organizations for a variety of reasons. I mean, sometimes they still, despite the revenue, are truly small businesses where you've got a founder or a founding team, or they took it from, we used to be a 50-person company and now we're an 800-person company. And they have business problems like everybody else and need advice and support. And what's interesting, and also a challenge for people like us, and I'm sure you can appreciate this in a smaller company, George, right? You just have to wear a lot of hats.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And you have to be able to do a lot of things and be resourceful and say, well, okay, I need this particular, skill. And where am I going to find that? Am I going to go learn it myself? Am I going to go hire somebody? Am I going to go rent somebody? Am I going to go partner with somebody? And it really kind of challenges, the MSP or the services provider to be creative.
It's interesting. Let me kind of unwind a couple of things there. So number one, we've heard it for a long time, right? Hey, your vendor is going to start competing against you. And, now all of a sudden Dell and Microsoft and your local telco company and all these guys are going to be, the people that are going up against you in these opportunities. And then everybody kind of chuckles a little bit after they say that. And they say, how have you ever seen any of these companies come downstream enough to even handle the sub 500 employee organization, let alone the sub 100 person organization?
Right.
And every time the answer is no, they never do actually figure that out. Now you see, you come from the other side, right? Accentures and the companies of the like, they're never going to touch a company below, even like you said, a couple 100 million, maybe even.
Their cost structure is simply too high. But yeah, you're right. I've heard the same thing about Dell. Oh, they're going to take over managed services. Or in the first MSP that I started, we were working with some copier dealers. And it's kind of, oh, they're going to take over this industry. And at the end of the day, as much as they like to say it, Dell wants to sell hardware.
Yeah.
Copier dealers want to sell toner.
Yeah.
And all these ancillary things that we see in the MSP space, I mean, of course, increasingly around security, is not where
Big
these
word.
people live, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of like and they make a very seemingly very compelling argument around, well, I have the customer relationship and they know me and they've been writing checks to me and all that kind of stuff. Um, and there's some truth to all of that.
Mhm.
But certainly what we try to do, at our company TTG is really focus much more on, well, what are your real problems,
Mhm.
Mr. Customer or Ms. Customer, and let's try to come up with something that really makes sense for what you need, right? And I think there's some debate, right? There's always been this debate going on for a decade now. Do you price by head count? Do you price by device? Do you sell the same stack to everybody? Do you have the gold, silver, bronze? And those are all kind of philosophical arguments that, that's a much longer conversation than we're going to have today.
Yes.
But every MSP kind of needs to figure out where do they play in that. And it's a little different answer for everybody. So TTG is much more about, we're a 30-year-old company, by the way.
Mhm.
And we have done a lot of work in telecom consulting. We've been through the acquisition of a company that I ran up until a few years ago, have been getting increasingly into data services consulting. But we really kind of take this approach of, let's not try to do a one size fits all stack.
Mhm.
And let's really talk to the customer about what their needs are. Our CEO loves to say, I get really tired when I see these service providers come in and say, hey, I've got this shopping basket for you to pick from. When our approach is more, let's take you to a shopping mall where they have some different stores, and let's figure out which of these things really might, be the right things for you based on what their
That's
business needs and goals are, budget,
it's an
etc.
interesting approach because like your background kind of sounds like you came from like the business process consulting and like, hey, let's work backwards from what is the problem, right? Totally get it. And quite frankly, that's more of a business advisor than necessarily a technology company. Although you can take technology and solve the problem, right? And that's kind of how we sandwich the thing together. But you know, back to your kind of philosophical conversation, which is like, all right, well, standardization is kind of how these people try and scale in the IT services business. And when you start to mix all these vendors up in all these line items, then how do you manage well while scaling, right? They're almost competing forces.
It is, and it's a delicate balance, to be honest. And I guess I would qualify what I said a little bit, which is, because my technicians out here would kill me if I said, hey, let's start supporting this, let's start supporting that. I think it's important to have a point of view
Mhm.
and have kind of some core products. But I get calls from partners all the time, said, hey, we've got this new kind of backup.
Mhm.
And I'd say, okay, I love the people that have the Office 365 backup.
Mhm.
And I'd say, okay, there's 10 of them out there. Well, and I use one, and in a couple of unique cases, I use a different one, but I have two, and I'm not going to have 10.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, in terms of a client issue, it's around, why is this solving your business problem?
Mhm.
And I struggle a lot of times with some of the vendors that just want to say, well, I can save you a nickel a mailbox or whatever it's going to be.
Well, versus the 150 man hours is going to take me to get.
Exactly. And my thing is, well, that's sort of good for you, but why is it good for me? And most importantly, why is it good for my client?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't really do anything for them. And as it relates to investment in tools, right? everybody's got an RMM. There's been some consolidation, and now there's
Yeah.
new ones springing up over the
Yeah.
last decade. And we talk to people like that, and my view is, what's the business case? And when the people say, but I want to show you these really cool features. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care about features. I'm not the technology guy. I have to convince my customer why the service there's gonna be getting is better. And my technician, my technicians have a tremendous investment in the tools that they use. So we'll sometimes have those conversations around, why is brand X better than brand Y? But I think our focus is always, how does it enable, either automation that's going to reduce cost, or integrate with some other tools that will improve operational performance for not just us, but also for the customer.
Yeah, 100%. It's very intriguing because usually, like, and maybe you can, I'm curious to see what your answer as to this actually is. So, like, when you have a customer who they're like, "Hey, you are the IT department, right? It's your problem now. I'm hiring you to be that person. So whatever you choose, like, obviously you have that discussion up front, what's included, what's not included, right? But
Right.
whatever you choose, like, generally speaking, they don't ask, hey, which vendor for this, which vendor for that? What do you put, like, they just expect that you're going to do what needs to be done and you're going to bring that to the table, right? It's a little bit different when you're doing like kind of like a co-managed or consulting type play, right? Because there's already technical people involved, or you're already trying to talk shop, with somebody who's in the organization. And now all of a sudden that question does become a lot more targeted, right? Because they want to understand and do their own research and make sure that they're happy with the answer, right? So generally speaking, if you're in a kind of a more of a pure play managed services space where it's kind of like cookie cutter houses that you're putting up down the street, like, you have a lot more control to rip and replace that tool, right? And it's just like, hey, as long as the customer still has the check box, they're not going to question that, right? But it's definitely on the, hey, you're going in and it's a larger customer and they're like, well, hey, we got compliances, we have to make sure it's validated, we have to get buy-in from these different stakeholders within the company. Like, that's a lot more detailed on selling them on the actual solution. How
Sure.
does that usually play for you?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because increasingly we've been selling into larger clients, sort of true mid-size or small enterprise type businesses. They have an IT department. It's been a mixed bag. It's hard to give you an answer, but it's interesting that kind of the legacy IT guys, if I can use that term, don't really like, they don't, right? This is all kind of noise to them. I guess I would say I found less resistance than I thought. Sometimes they've had a tool, it might have been in there as something that was used by, their predecessor. Again, these large organizations have generally been around a while, but at the end of the day, people still want their business problems solved. And in the case of a lot of the co-managed situations that we've seen, frankly, George, the IT guys are just like, you know what? I have bigger fish to fry. You need to make this problem go away from me.
Mm-hmm.
Be it managing a network, or managing their server environment, because they're focused on app dev or ERP. I haven't really found a whole lot of people that say, wait a minute, you want to use Auvik versus Logic Monitor? Let's have a technology debate about that. We haven't really run into that much of it, frankly. A lot of it's been, wait, you're going to take care of it now? Because I got more important stuff to do. And I think it's and I love those sorts of discussions, right? In terms of figuring out, how do we make the services that we provide valuable, and essentially let them do the things that truly only they can do, right? I don't want to build their website. I don't want to build their internal apps. They've got, increasingly their own data analytics they want to work with. But it really comes back to, yeah, we have 30 locations and we need to make sure the network's up. And when the network goes down, we need to know why and make sure we're getting the ISP escalations done and getting bandwidth adjusted if necessary. So that's actually been very exciting for TTG in the last few years because we're increasingly doing more of that, and I think that's the future. Is you see a lot of consolidation even amongst MSPs, and again, I think that fits to what TTG does better, and where we try to play, because we don't want to be the some people, we get calls from these marketing companies sometimes that say, I'm gonna let you close 5 new accounts a month.
Yeah.
I don't want 5 accounts a month.
Mm-hmm.
If we got a good account a quarter, we'd be happy with that, right? If it's sort of like the right kind of account where we're providing the right kinds of services that we can do well and we can make a good margin at it and they see value in what we're doing, we would much rather take that approach than just sort of the, slam it into the program and execute it. And maybe that gets back to your question earlier about scalability.
Mm-hmm.
Again, kind of our CEO would say, I would be thrilled if we had 100 really good clients versus 1,000 or 5,000 really good clients, because I think where we try to differentiate ourselves is more around premium service and personal service. We use the term white glove a lot, but we think there's something real behind that.
Wow. So when you're going out to prospect, generally speaking, it sounds like you're going into, you said mid enterprise, right? So could you qualify that for anyone that's watching that? Like, who would you, not anything proprietary, right? Is there specific verticals you target? Is it a specific size of customer that you target? Just trying to get an idea.
The sorts of customers. So let me tell you a little bit about TTG. So I didn't even give you my full. Let me give you the little thumbnail about. So Don Ribar, partner at TTG, here in Columbus, Ohio. We got our start in telecom services about 30 years ago by our founder and still CEO, Brad Hayes. And Brad actually started his career on selling telecom services to customers. Mm-hmm. And what he kind of realized was, I made a lot of money. I ended up doing sales training for people. I had a great run at that, but it also occurred to me that we as service providers were not really thinking about the end customer. Mm-hmm. And, in the old days, right, you'd say, well, we're selling somebody long distance services for 50 cents a minute. And then 2 weeks later, we're selling somebody on the other side of the parking lot the same services for 45 cents a minute or whatever. And the idea behind TTG was really to kind of flip that script a little bit and focus more on how do we really help the customer navigate this confusing world of telecom. And we adopted this model organizationally of really customer advocacy, which meant that the kinds of companies that we worked with were ones that had a lot of locations, not necessarily industry specific, but a lot of locations where there's many data circuits, voice circuits spread out across a broad area. And as you probably know, telecom is not always something somebody raises their hand and say, oh, I want to be in charge of that.
Yeah.
So consequently, people didn't really know how much are we spending, why are we spending it, are we even paying for the kinds of services that we need to be getting? Mm-hmm. And so a big chunk of TTG's business kind of grew out of that legacy around, okay, and one of the things we actually do is we have customers send us their telecom bills every month. We kind of have the letter of authority on those contracts. and they come to a team of people that we have, and we go through, okay, here's all the things that they're spending, and this is the service they're supposed to be getting, and this is what they're getting billed for. And we actually will raise disputes on behalf of the customers. So we found 5-figure savings, rebates, essentially, sometimes even into the 6 figures. I know of at least one that kind of come out of that constant attention to their telecom operations. And in some respects, it works almost like an accounts payable portion of the customer's business, but on an extended outsourced basis. So we kind of got into working with these multi-location customers where, and again, I use an example that there's a chain of furniture stores. They've got 72 locations. Wow. And they don't really have a telecom department. So when they open a new store or something happens where they need to shuffle people around, we manage the installation, coordinate the installs, procure the services, help them negotiate their contracts, and actually manage those telecom services completely. So we've got a customer service group that essentially will do all the moves, adds, and changes. So we really kind of proudly say we don't sell VoIP, but we do a lot of consulting around VoIP, and we understand the marketplace, and we really want to advocate to the customer. And by the way, you don't want to run that anyway, because you already know it's a pain. So we actually do a lot of the back end management. And then increasingly those customers started asking, because they liked what they were getting. We acquired a company a few years ago that does network design. So we've got some people that do, design new networks. So we have some multi-location WAN clients. We have a manufacturing client based out of Cincinnati that has several locations around the world. We've got another manufacturing company out of Cleveland that has plants mostly all over the US and North America. Where there's they essentially are a mining operation for a specialty type of product. And they've really just said, hey guys, we need you to handle this. But these have been customers now for over a decade, and they've been coming back to us asking for, can you help us with our data side? And that's why I think as they grow, their internal IT people are getting overwhelmed with, we can't do it all. So the same customers now asking us about, can you help us source technicians across the country, because they acquired another company, to help us really understand, and the documentation's terrible, what a surprise. Can you help us kind of understand what this other company was doing and what their network looks like and what equipment, and, so we've really kind of customized services for even that customer to say, all right, we've been doing these things for you for a long time, but let's add on some other value added services. And had that particular one has not come back to us yet and said, this is great, can you manage it all for me? They might someday.
Hey, if you don't ask, you can't get. But no, I mean, kind of like, hey, you already have the relationship on the connectivity side and the communication side, and then the kind of data and networking side is just a natural progression, right? Natural evolution into what comes next. And again, there's this kind of spider web that kind of sprawls depending on where you entered the picture, right? Technology is a big, broad word, right? Kind of like security is a big, broad word. And so everybody kind of comes in at a different place, and then it kind of starts to all come together in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, there's been probably a voice data conversion that's been talked about for a long time. It seems like it's finally happening.
Maybe
more so than in the past, but go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned the copier guys, they're another one. And there's obviously a lot of acquisitions happening, although when you count up the acquisitions, it's still like compared to the overall, right? It's still kind of like this. But since we're on the topic of how things are going and how you got to where you got to and how these conversations are going, let's talk about security for a second. How is that conversation coming up? Is it coming up often enough? And how are you guys approaching it?
Sure. It is coming up. The one thing that I would say is driving a lot of security conversations, excuse me. I think I read that the year 2020 was the first year that insurance claims for cybersecurity outweighed cybersecurity premiums.
Oh,
So
took that long, huh?
the insurance companies finally lost money.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm sure you're aware of this, right? Over the last few years, these questionnaires that they send out their customers are getting longer and longer and longer. And frankly, that has been driving a lot of the conversations, right? We get calls from our customers saying, hey, help us with this, because I don't even know what this language means.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helped open some doors with customers where we've had very limited services for a variety of reasons, but they're saying, I think I need some help now. And they're open to that because they realize that if they don't do it, their own premiums are going to increase, or in some cases, their customers are who may be large companies are coming to them and say, by the way, prove to us that you do all these things. And so that's made it a little easier. The other group, unfortunately, is the people that got breached. And right, you just say, once you've been robbed, you're a lot better about locking your doors. Unfortunately, some people say, well, my door, but I haven't been robbed yet. And we've got a couple of those. And we just try to keep educating people, and people kind of slowly come around. But probably I'd say the last 3 years of our business, that's probably been the number one topic, because, and this goes back to what we were saying, oh, well, Dell is going to do managed services. Dell doesn't want to talk about security. They want to sell their hardware, and maybe they'll figure out a way to do patching and a message. I mean, when I got into managed services, it was all about, patching and updating. And now you still talk about patching and updating, but it's really in the context of security, which is accurate, by the way. But we've had some customers that we've been talking to for a while about, you really should be doing some of these things. We've got I'm not ready. We've seen some people finally say, okay, I think I might get it now. And unfortunately, some of the, incidents, most recently with Kaseya, but, going back to the Colonial Pipeline, it's hit the media enough where it's hard to miss, even if you are inclined to say that's a problem I don't worry about. I even think some smaller companies who've historically wanted to say, I'm too small, they don't care about me, realize they're not exempt. And sometimes we say, well, and by the way, because you're small and they don't think you're paying attention, that's why you're the perfect target.
So when are these mainstream media stories actually coming up in your dialogue with the customers? I mean,
oh, sure.
Okay. Like, are they to the point where are they asking you, hey, you're not using these guys over here that I saw in the news, are you? I mean,
yeah, I've had those emails from customers that happened when was it? Last fall, when the SolarWinds Orion supply chain breach occurred. I got a couple emails from people said, do you use that? And I kind of hate to kick a person when they're down. But we've had conversations with people to kind of proactively say, by the way, some of the things that you've read about, you are not at, I guess I would, right, it's hard to, you never say never, but here's some things we're doing to protect ourselves. And I think the kinds of customers, I mean, like managed services providers are targets because we have good information on other people. So when we look at our customers in, financial services, CPA firms, those sorts of businesses, they're a little more open to it. But like I said, in some respects, it's some people are in denial over things, and that goes for computer security also.
Yeah, it's very interesting where the I'm sure you run into it all the time. I mean, and I don't think a week goes by where I don't talk to somebody's like, yeah, I got these dentists, or I got these doctors, or I got the lawyers, or these professional services people who are like, yeah, no, I don't need that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like if I was a lawyer and I'm doing, I have a lot of customers, and somewhere in there is a high profile customer, last thing I want is privileged documentation to hit the street, right? I
Right.
mean, that's a disaster. Or imagine if I was like an orthopedic surgeon and I was like a specialist, and kind of like you, right? You kind of are cherry picking customers that fit. What if they, were dealing with like a high profile sports star, right? You're from Ohio. Let's say it was LeBron James. I don't want that coming out from my side. I don't want his records coming out from my side, right? So,
Right.
but it just seems like, to your point, either they see it in the news and they're finally like, uh-oh, or somebody in their circle got hit, right? And it finally took them saying, oh, yeah, I do what he does, and I don't want to have the same problem. And then finally it's like, yeah, remember all these conversations we've been having? That's
Right.
all this, right? So it's, I
I,
don't know whether I feel good or bad about it, but at
well,
least the conversations are escalating.
sort of some advice for the MSPs would be, we actually talked to one of our customers who's a financial planner,
Mhm.
who actually had us write up a piece that he put in his newsletter, which goes to his customers, and they're not prospects of ours. These are high net worth individuals, but he actually wanted us to help him market how he's trying to protect his own customers,
Mhm.
which I thought was sort of an interesting twist. All right, we were talking about it, and here's why you need to do these things, and he's like, this is good, but I want to tell my customers. So in some ways, security became marketing for him.
Now, this is actually very intriguing because now it's everybody's problem, right? It's
Sure.
not just your customer's problem or your problem. They have customers, and their customers could have customers. And that there's actually a very good uh, rope, to the comment that you made earlier about, hey, like you may be downstream from a company that's having to comply with government regulation or some sort of industry special regulation, and it may not be super visible to you because it's your customer's customer, but crap rolls downhill, right? At some point, it will eventually make it to you.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. So, um, you brought up, SolarWinds, you brought up, Kaseya. Um, uh, Generally speaking, right? What's your position from your side, right? Has your MSP used these events to go back and start knocking on the doors and asking the right questions? Hopefully you haven't been affected, but has that changed any behavior for you inside of your company?
I mean, I'd say, unfortunately, because so many of these incidents have been occurring the last few years. I mean, they've been occurring longer than that. It's just that they've been,
More
right.
noticeable, yeah.
The media likes an easy story. This is an
Yeah.
easy story, and people are a little more aware of it. We've certainly been trying to continue to have those conversations. And we're not a massive company, but it's sort of interesting. Fortunately, we've not had anybody lose their data or pay a ransom. We had a couple of close calls, but we were able to get that resolved. But we still managed to come up, as I'm sure most MSPs do, with some anecdotes about, where's this customer said, I don't need to do this. And the reality is, it is a good way to position services and help pull through complementary services. And this example was several years ago, but we did have a business owner who had built several pretty good sized companies, and her email was hacked. It was one of these, why do I need multi-factor authentication? And, I won't go into the example any more than that, but when her operations director asked me to come over and meet with their CEO, she said, you know what? Let me have it. Give me the straight stuff. Because I think she realized she had been tuning a lot of this out.
Yeah.
And then after we talked about what had happened and what could have happened and what protections you can put in place, some of which are actually incredibly inexpensive and non-complex, they've put that in place. But you kind of think, and you hear about these stories, somebody went and bought Amazon gift cards or Apple iTunes gift cards because they got an email from the CFO. That didn't happen. That happened at one of our clients, but not in an area that we have anything to do with. But it was just sort of interesting. That stuff really does happen.
Amazing, right?
You kind of think people do that. They don't make a phone call and say, I know you don't email me this low-level employee, but strange things happen. And so we just try to have a, bank of realistic, I should say, not realistic, real anecdotes, which we can share with people about, this kind of stuff happens. At the same time, we try to put it in context around, this kind of gets back to not always having the same security stack. And, people like to talk about security as many layers of an onion. I've told customers, I said, look, I can lock you down in such a way that I will pretty much guarantee that there won't be any problems, but your productivity is going to be terrible. Your people are going to hate you. You're going to hate me, and it's going to cost a fortune. And so, it's really much more around how do you prioritize risks? How do you prioritize risk management? And kind of come up with what is the right balance of security versus expense versus productivity. How do you triangulate that for each organization? Because it's a little different.
It is, definitely is. Although we had a session with Ryan Burton from PAX 8. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were going through all the different terms, MDR and XDR and SOC versus SIEM and all these different, tools and who's actually doing what and what questions to ask. And he kind of ended the conversation with, you actually put it all in and do the right things. And, I'm not saying, go, you to the point where you're promising you're protecting NASDAQ, but reasonable price to put the stack in place.
Sure.
Like $50 a user, your MSP cost cover about 80% of it. And I was like, in the overall scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, right? But of course, by the time you present that and you add enough headcount, and then you put a little bit of labor costs in there, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I can't pay that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and if you're dealing with a 10-person organization versus a 500-person organization, it's different. And we have a client, great client in a larger company, and kind of their CEO has a view of, if we're gonna get audited, and I mean that small a, I want a C. I don't want an A, right? I need you to make sure I get enough protection to cover the core things. We get into arguments about this stuff all the time, very spirited arguments at times. And, he's like, hey, by the way, this is why I'm paying you guys to challenge me on this stuff. But it's more of, do you lock down the financial systems? Do you lock down who has access to key things? Other stuff, again, it depends on everybody's situation. So yeah, that's why I said, I think it's important to have a point of view. And I think, we always have hey, here's 3 or 4 things that you can do. MFA, really easy. So that's, I think, something that people are getting more sophisticated about, even in their personal lives as consumers. And I think that's helped them get a little more comfortable having these conversations as business people. Because I've had people say, I hated this whole MFA thing. And then I realized that, and they resisted it. But I realized that me and all my employees probably have to use some sort of 2-factor to get into our bank accounts when we use our phone app. It's like, yes, it's the same thing. And so that has changed in society and has consequently, I think, filtered into the business world enough where it's not just a view of, oh, you're here and you're trying to sell me something and I don't know that I really need it and it probably costs too much, and just, I don't want to have that conversation, to people saying, yeah, I have seen this stuff in the media. I have heard anecdotes of friends who have had problems, or people in their workplaces, or other business owners who are peers, etc.
Yeah, no, 100%. Before the call, we were going through, hey, what's happening out in the world, right? I know Microsoft Inspire is happening actually, like, as we speak right now, day 2. One of the big things that came out yesterday was a flat fee Microsoft 365, which is basically like a virtual machine at the user level. You know exactly what your price point is instead of like consumption. Although this style of delivery has been out there, right? Like it just wasn't a flat fee before, right? It was kind of variable and you had to kind of get a calculator and kind of do the math. Has there been a lot of adoption from your side on kind of that approach? Or yeah, especially in the larger organizations, I feel like they very push back against doing that kind of hybrid type work, right? They rather kind of want to keep it within the walls to some degree. So I'm curious how that's been going, right? Obviously SaaS is SaaS, and Microsoft 365, like it's cheaper to put a $4 mailbox on Microsoft server than your own. No argument there. But like complete workload or workstation movement towards the cloud, have you seen a heavy adoption on your side yet?
Well, it's interesting, and again, it sort of gets to personalities. I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've converted all but one of our clients who are running their own exchange to the Office platform.
Yes.
We've got a holdout that just says, I don't want to subscribe to software.
Mm-hmm.
But then we still need to do other things, some of them on a subscription basis, to make sure she's adequately protected.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been having these conversations with customers around, Microsoft's whole strategy is just to bundle this stuff in. Mm-hmm. This may sound like an odd answer, George, but most of them say, yeah, I figured that.
So, okay.
I mean, it's sort of cynical, right? But it's people somewhat expect it. But I mean, again, kind of back to security, and this is something we've been taking a look at is, well, Microsoft's got an awful lot of invested capital in their products and they're continuing to push it, and seemingly bottomless resources otherwise. So they're actually building some pretty good security tools in some of the different, license levels. And so we've been having conversations with that, including with some managed services type customers where people were buying their licenses on their own. And we said, you know what, we can help you be more creative around what you buy and how you buy it, and be more clever, if you will. And so that's actually been a great conversation to have with customers as well.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Since we're on the Microsoft topic, you had said, hey, let's have a conversation about Teams voice, since you come from the telco space. I happen to play in that space myself, but let's talk about it, right? Especially for the larger organizations, I feel like the $57 per user list price for anybody over 300, which you play in that space, I'm not sure that's super affordable on the budget item, I think.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. So there's one customer, we're in the process of moving their licenses, and they've said, we're thinking that someday we might need to move to E5 licensing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, why?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have a great answer, right? Well, I think I'm going to need, I'm like, well, most of the stuff that you need is going to be available through other sorts of add-ons, but you don't want to have to buy this phone system that you don't necessarily want. We are seeing a lot of people that are looking at Teams integrated with other, traditional telecom backends,
Mm-hmm.
be it, anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's these sort of integration platforms out there, and I won't mention any products here, but that sort of route calls from this, legacy phone system or a legacy phone system provider, where the call gets handed off to Teams. And one of the things that we've been struggling with a little bit is trying to get more information around what happens to that once it actually gets into Teams. And what I mean by that, George, is, if you're a small company, you're 10 people and you're in an office, and worst case, you can open the door and shout down the hall and, say, hey, Mary, I got a call here for you, or whatever. I'll just make it work on Teams. But we've been working with one large client and helping manage their conversion. And they were going to save a lot of money, and are saving a lot of money by kind of getting rid of most of the handsets for most of their employees. But they're also in a business where they get a lot of calls from the outside. And so they've got a lot of ring groups. And we're still learning little things that are more important for people that deal with outside callers.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, frankly, we have not seen that there's a whole lot of knowledge or insight, some of which we're kind of learning. I mean, simple things like, I just heard this week that if you are on if you are you have items in your calendar
Mm-hmm.
that could be anything. Maybe it's a meeting like the one we're having now, or maybe you stuck a little reminder in there, as many of us do, to say, make sure to call my wife because it's our anniversary, and I stick a little calendar reminder in there. I don't forget my anniversary, but I might or might not have a reminder about it. Okay, I'll just throw that out there.
Guilty.
Teams marks you as busy,
That's right.
and therefore the call does not ring up.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we were doing some testing, a lot of people are saying, well, what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the sorts of kind of more operational things. Are like, now, do we train users to make sure they go in and change their status to say, even though I've got something on my calendar, I'm available? That's a lot to ask of people. And the idea that if, what do you do if you're dealing with multiple calls? Mm-hmm. So we have a customer that works in the child protection area. They do foster parent recruitment and foster children placement. So they get calls a lot. Got a kid at the courthouse, needs to be put into, foster care immediately, needs somebody to come pick them up, blah, blah, blah. Those are not the kind of calls you want to miss. Mm-hmm. Right? For a whole variety of reasons. And so I guess I'm looking at what Teams has done, and Microsoft has a lot of money, marketing and technology development otherwise. But as our CEO likes to say, phones have had a lot of features that have worked pretty well for the last 75 years. Mm-hmm. And if we just suddenly rip those out, from people, what is that going to mean? And it's not just people are used to answering it on these things. It's, do I answer it on my handset? Do I answer it on my computer? Do I answer it on my phone? And there's a, there's sort of a geeky elegance to that. But if you're, just a human being, and you're a line employee at a typical business, There's a lot of cultural implications, training implications. I mean, organizational culture, right? Training implications. There's a lot of stuff associated with um, answering the phone that hasn't quite been figured out, while this technology suddenly enables you to do all these really slick and cool things.
100%. So there's no question that there is a feature differential, I would call it, right, between a phone system that you bought 20 years ago. I hate to say that, in the closet, right? Some guy came and put it in, versus the subscription-based solution, right? And listen, I just like I said, technology is a big world, and just as I said, security is a big word, and like you kind of start from one point and then kind of matriculate through that. Yeah, Microsoft's a great collaboration story. I mean, Zoom's a great collaboration story. WebEx is a great collaboration story. Even Slack. But as a communication platform for voice and contact center, it's got a long way to go. So you can merge that experience, right, and hybrid it so that you can fill in the gap and create a big picture that fits, or you can try and square peg round hole. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I know there's a lot of ways to slice that, and but at the end of the day, I think the smart technology provider is saying kind of what you just said earlier. And Microsoft has that $100 million, $1 billion marketing budget, whatever it is. It's way more than me and you have. There's a way to parlay off of that, yet still get to the right answer. And just paying for a subscription and crossing your fingers and hoping that it works is not always the answer. And I think Microsoft, even in their 365, right? They're like, you said earlier, hey, I get a call. There's 10 different 365 backup vendors. Why do I care about saving a nickel from one to the other? The reality is that the reason those guys exist is because Microsoft raised their hand and said, we can't do it all. All right. And like, you should complement our service with something else. Same thing, I think, fits in this Teams conversation, right? I mean, it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger. I understand the organizational value of trying to use it to kind of converge multiple things. But yeah, as a voice solution, yeah, it's very much, I call it a bolt line. That's my definition for it, right? Hey, you can it's like me plugging my cell phone into the side of the computer and saying, yeah, you can make and receive calls now. But yeah, if you wanted to do some of the stuff that you've been doing for a long time, like you said, that's not going to happen. So there is a way to hybrid it. There's a way to get that, kind of converged solution. There is a way to bring those contact center kind of style features in over top as well. But you're right, not one size fits all. And to your point, there's companies out there that try and kind of bridge the traditional with the new and do it that way. I'm a fan of, not everybody fits in 365 land, right? Like there's some people that just don't need to be there, don't need to pay the Microsoft tax or licensing to be there, but still need to be able to answer a call. You can get the best of both worlds, right? You can have a pool of people here and a pool of people here and still have them interact without having to do the whole calling plan per user. So it's a very interesting opportunity. There's no question about it. I think that if anybody comes and says, Don, hey, I can make it do it all without having to really bring anything else in, like it's there. I don't think I've not run into anybody who's going to put their name to that sentence or that statement. So that means that you got to be ready to go in and figure out how to make it work, especially when one size doesn't fit all, right? Like you said, the very small organization may be easy, but once you get to your size, for sure, right? Those hundreds or thousands of employees, there's a lot of complexity there that they're just not built to handle, for sure. Listen, Don, it's been fantastic. I love hearing different people from different positions. It's like you have a very unique background in how you guys kind of position yourself in the market. And I just think it's good that other people in the technology business hear how people think about things and deal with customers and how, how you kind of do what you do, right? Like, and I think that commoditization that, hey, everybody's doing the same thing. This phone call really points out that, hey, listen, you can play that game but you don't have to play it too, right? You can do it a different way.
Right.
I think that's a huge takeaway from this phone call for sure, this podcast. Really appreciate you coming on. For everyone that watched this or wants to watch this or will be watching this or listening to it, this session was recorded. It's available on mspinitiative.com under sessions. If you're interested in just picking Don's brain, because who doesn't want to talk shop with other people in the industry, look him up. I mean, guy knows what he's talking about. Clearly, I found it very intriguing. Hit him up on LinkedIn, send him a message. What do you got to lose? I think sounds like he's really open to have a conversation, because that's the kind of guy he is. So I appreciate you, Don, for coming on board as well.
Thank you for divining that I am indeed a good guy, George. I appreciate that. No, I actually like networking with other MSPs because to your point, I think it's interesting to understand why people got to the place that they did, and people don't need to be in the same place. But I always try to get something out of those conversations as well that kind of makes me think, maybe we should try to do this. Because while I'm happy how we've grown and where we've come and where I believe we're going to get to, I don't think we have everything in the world figured out yet either.
That's the best part of the hallway conversation, right? I mean, anytime I've ever walked to an event, I get more out of these conversations than every session I could have sat in, right? Because it's real world. It's not hypothetical. So 100%, Donna. I appreciate you bringing your real world to us, and we'll catch you down the line, my friend.
All right, George, thanks very much.
You got it. Have a good one, guys.